Welcome everyone. So we'll get started in just a moment. We're just going to let a few of our attendees come into the room. Okay. All right, just a few more moments. Participants coming in. Welcome everyone. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. So greetings everyone. My name is Brandon Kyle. I am the Executive Director of Alumni and Family Engagement. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Student and Family webinar. This morning, we'll be hearing from campus leadership and key stakeholders to provide an update on the spring semester and our plans for moving forward. Today's panelists will include Sandra Vasquez, our Vice President of Student Affairs, Alan Omoto, our Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean of Faculty. We'll also be hearing from a medical representative from Student Health Services later on in the morning, Dr. Jindal. We also have Shari Simon, parent of Pitzer students of class of 2022 and 2025, and also our co-president of the FLC. We also today will be having our discussion moderated by Vince Greer, our new Assistant Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students. Today we'll be opening up for questions as well as sharing some of the questions you've already submitted. And you'll be able to submit those questions via the Q&A portal below. But before we begin today's panel discussion and presentations, I would like to introduce Pitzer College President Melvin Oliver, who will provide our opening remarks. Thank you so much, President Oliver.
Thank you, Brandon. First, I want to wish you all a great new year, full of success, good health, and peace. Today, I want to extend to all our parents and students a warm welcome to this webinar. Now, we hope this webinar will give you the information you need to know to help begin the spring semester as safely as possible. I want to thank the whole Pitzer community for the part they played that contributed to making the fall semester so successful. Our staff, students, and faculty all made the right decisions that helped us protect our community. Thank you all for, quote, being mindful of each other, unquote. But now we have another challenge, the Omicron variant. We, along with all of higher education, are faced with starting our semester with a variant that is more infectious than Delta, but less severe in its consequence. And as a consequence, we all have had to adapt. During this webinar, we want to be as transparent as possible as to what changes we have made, what are the medical challenges we face, and how important it is for us to maintain our commitment to a community that is committed to each other's success and good health. Because I know our community and I've seen how we responded to major challenges, I am optimistic that we will meet this challenge as well. We have a strong team of people ranging from our COVID task force, which includes faculty, staff, and students, to our cabinet and our partners from both our Student Health Services and our on-campus medical group, Hamilton Health, that are working tirelessly to ensure that we will be successful in navigating the next set of challenges associated with COVID. So without further ado, let me turn this over to our newest member of our team, our Dean of Students, Vince Greer.
Thank you, President Oliver. And I first of all like to say welcome to everyone. Happy New Year. We really hope that everyone is staying safe during these really unprecedented times. I want to start out by saying we had a really successful fall semester in ensuring the safety of our students. And a big part of that was a lot of the proactive measures that's been put in place to ensure that students can have a safe in-person experience. A big part of that has been consistent and vigilant testing, really adhering to our masking policies, and really being nimble. As we know, we're very much in the midst of a pandemic. And so there are many times where we may need to shift along the lines. But really staying committed to that community agreement and the pathway forward requires a partnership from all of our constituencies. So it starts with our students. First and foremost, Again, we really want our students to be here in person to have a meaningful experience, and that requires that consistency to continue. As President Oliver mentioned, the variant that we're navigating right now is even more trickier, and if not careful, can be transmitted a lot easier. And so we've put some proactive measures in place to ensure of that. Starting with our first 2 weeks, we're going to be having our students test twice a week during that time, because we really want to try our best to catch as many of these cases, positive cases, on the front end, to ensure that we're able to have a safe in-class experience, but even just across. We've already had to make some necessary adjustments with the social experience, and this isn't anything that we think is going to be prolonged, but we surely want to make sure that students are in a good place around this. In addition to the testing, we're being a little bit more vigilant and a little bit more really locked in on some of those one-off cases where maybe students weren't as consistent with their testing. We've already had to have some conversations on an individual level, just to remind students that for us all to be able to be here, we're going to have to stay on top of those things. And so we've had some students be sure to sign agreements, and we're doing a little bit more, I would say a little bit more as it relates to accountability in this front. And these aren't easy conversations to have. Again, we're not here to exasperate folks' mental health on this front, but again, we want to prioritize safety. In addition to that, we have a slew of masks that we'll be providing for students as they're checking in and throughout their time. So at any point in time, if a student's forgotten their mask somehow or any of those sort of things, we'll be able to provide those at a moment's notice. We'll just have them swing by the Office of Student Affairs. Not only that, I also really want to reemphasize for our families and our parents that we need you to be a partner in this. And what I mean with that is that as much as I know our students are going to want to party and those sort of things at various points in the semester, on the front end of our semester, again, we really want to make sure that folks are staying safe. And so that's going to require folks to maybe dial back and really emphasize placing safety at the forefront. And so if we need to take a pause on some of those social outings, where we're meeting in larger groups and scaling that back some, it's really going to benefit us in the long run. And so having parents that's able to reinforce that really goes a long way. And I think you all can be a great ally within that. I also want to spend a little bit of time, I'm going to shift it over shortly in a moment to Sandy, my dear colleague and friend, to really sort of talk through what the student experience is going to look like in person. And so we will have N95 masks available. We have those right now. I've already had some students that's reached out, and we just encourage, once you arrive, feel free to drop by, and we'll make sure to pass those along. We'll also have those at our check-in stations as well as students are arriving back on campus. So this will be throughout the semester. We recognize the importance of this. As I mentioned, though, I'll also have turn it over to Sandy in a moment to really just sort of talk through what the student experience is going to look like, some of the more intentionality that we're doing, recognizing that we're still in a pandemic and we need to be equitable and accommodating the needs of our students. And so we'll also hear from many other members, as we mentioned, throughout the time, and then we'll spend some time on the back end answering a lot of the questions that are coming in. So we want to make sure that folks feel informed, and feel free to fire those away in the chat. So with that being said, I'll pass it along to Sandy to just give us a little bit more detail on the student experience.
Thank you so much, Vince. I really appreciate it. And thank you all. This journey together as a Pitzer family is an ever-evolving one. And really calling upon the community to continue with the resilient growth mindset through this process as we are going through this phase of the pandemic. We are so proud that at Pitzer College, all of our students are vaccinated. We only have one student who has an exemption. On top of that, our students have been committed to getting their booster. We announced that months prior to the mandate in partnership, which we're very grateful for Student Senate leadership partnership in that regard, as well as the COVID-19 task force. In addition, we have a majority, almost all of our students have been able to access and obtain the flu vaccine as well. So those critical pieces really have informed our ability to be where we are now in this phase of returning our students to campus. Our team is preparing isolation and quarantine spaces with students who are vaccinated. As you can imagine, that will result in really our ability to focus on those students who may be positive. I can assure you, our process here at Pitzer is working. You came and participated with us for move-in with your students in fall. We were one of the only campuses that allowed parents to come help students and families. We had 0 positive cases as a result of that experience. And so we are confident. We are a campus that leads with our core value of social responsibility. And we thank you again for participating in these practices with us as we prepare for move-in weekend. We are already seeing students predominantly returning on the traditional dates for spring, and we're so grateful for students to complete that form so that we can be prepared to provide support. In addition, we already have students here for early arrival, students who have been here through winter break that were experiencing housing insecurity. And our process is working by the very nature that pre-testing prior to arrival is capturing any positives before they arrive to campus. Upon arrival to campus, we are implementing, and this is in close consultation, not only with Student Health Services, but also our Pitzer dedicated Hamilton Health Box medical partners. In collaboration, we are requiring twice a week testing for 2 weeks upon return, because we want to make sure that we do capture any incidents and give students the support that they need. Our on-call dean will continue and has 365 24/7 be available to students regarding also including COVID support. We also have our nurse, Zephyr, who is our dedicated Hamilton Health Box nurse, who is supporting our on-call team for the pre-arrival positives that may need support with release dates as well. So what we ask is empathy and flexibility, as we manage also, our dedication to supporting students who need our dedicated resources and support. Now for return to campus and move-in, we invite all students to return during the traditional move-in weekend, however, by no later than January 28th. And the reason for that is we really want to make sure, especially as we think about our frontline workers, or think about our faculty in the classroom, we want to make sure that students who return by the 28th at noon are able to provide us not only with their negative PCR test, but also participate in the Student Health Services testing regimen on that Friday, the 28th, so that we have the both negative tests within the 1 week time frame in order for them to be ready to re-enter the classroom setting on Monday. In addition, we understand that some students, may experience challenges with, we understand everything going on with delayed flights or they may be impacted by COVID. We are here to support you. Students who may need resources or funding within the notice that was sent to students, that we can probably plop it into the chat here for everyone as a reminder. You can submit a request for funding to help provide support to you if you need support with changing flights or any visa related support pieces, and also for any COVID-19 related support or guidance that you might need. We do want to also reassure students that in relation to technology support, our Dean of Students, Vince, has been coordinating with his team, support to students who might need that. We are making targeted outreach to students who may experience insecurity needs and may need funding to access the purchase of a laptop. And so we encourage you to please reach out and lean in onto resources for your success, not only in the online 2 weeks, which is really a proactive mitigation effort, but also I want to reiterate very clearly, we remain committed and aspire to return to an in-person living, learning, residential experience. And so it's going to take all of us, as Dean Greer mentioned, to remain consistent with guidelines. I can share with you that mental health support is critical for us and is of great importance. Our Strive to Thrive program team will be implementing programs and providing an update related to initiatives that students can engage in. We are also enhancing support, dedicated counseling support for Pitzer College. It will be online for the first 2 weeks, and then we hope to pivot to an in-person dedicated counseling support, especially with expertise enhancing support for our BIPOC community as well. We are prepared also to provide students in partnership with faculty accommodation support for those that might be impacted by COVID-19 or any extenuating circumstances that may arise. We are excited about being able to also resume student employment. We did provide an update to students yesterday. We understand how valuable these experiences are for student development as it relates to their career and aspirations and skills. And so we are strongly encouraging supervisors that are able to be able to maintain employment online. However, we leave it at the discretion of supervisors and really that trust with students that we recognize that there are some in-person employment related pieces for students that cannot be completed online. And so we value students as a part of our team here at Pitzer College and are really glad that we will be able to resume that. Now, I know one of the questions on the back of students' minds is, dining. We announced prior to this surge, we had announced from the student deans that we were committed and we still remain committed to reevaluating crossover dining on February 7th, as well as 5C events and programs. But we ask for these 2 weeks. And again, that will be reevaluated in relation to the cross-campus student engagement. For now, we ask students to really stick to our reintegrating ourselves to the Pitzer community, and each sister campus will be doing that as we did in the fall. And it worked well for us as we return to our regiment of testing and our practices on each campus before we are able to reevaluate and go ahead and allow for that cross-campus student life exchange. We are confident that we will be able to get there. And really, it's really about that, as Dean Greer mentioned, the support and collaboration with students and student leaders, most importantly. And we hope on that February 7th reevaluation to also move the dial on crossover dining if we believe that that is possible at that time. I know we met yesterday as colleagues, as student deans, and we all affirmed that we aspire and have the ongoing desire to resume cross-campus dining for our students and to really get back to the 5C events and programs. Now, I say that to say that doesn't mean that we're not going to allow for 5C, clubs and organizations to start back up. You can do that in a virtual environment during these 2 weeks, and we fully support you in doing that. Now, for new student orientation, outreach has been made to our students, and we will be having an online virtual experience. We do encourage students, as we will with new student orientation, to spend time outdoors. Campus life has a lot of outdoor games, lawn games. We know how beloved the mountains are. All we ask is that you just, gather in small groups outdoors. You keep your distance, wear a mask if you're, depending on the size of your group. Now, what I mean by small, I would strongly urge you to keep that to maybe 5 or less together. We want to make sure that we're safe and thinking about our core value of social responsibility. I've had really a few emails from students, and please forgive me that my bandwidth to reply to so many emails is limited at this time. And so I hope that in addressing you all in this platform, you can hear me. And that is, with our core value of social responsibility, it's not about I, it's about we. It's about us, and it's about our beloved community. And so I just ask you to think about that for a minute as you think about, your ways of engagement, because it's going to take all of us to be able to get to that normalcy in that reevaluation phase that we're committed to hopefully resuming a sense of normalcy, as well as that cross-campus dining and 5C events and programs. And I do want to just reiterate, this includes no non-suite mates or 5C guests within the residence halls for those 2 weeks. We are not going to be registering events or programs through Campus Life during that time. And we hope to provide updates on, a 5C community agreement as well. Our Gold Fitness Center, you will see, will have reduced density by appointment only. And also I want to share, in relation to Pomona Pitzer Athletics, we at this time are not allowing for spectators. We are following closely medical guidance and CDC and Los Angeles County Department of Public Health guidance. Majority of our athletic programs are outdoors this spring. And so we are also following NCAA policy and guidelines. And so if anything should change, we will pivot as necessary. And at this point in time, consistent with the entire region, this is a pathway that all campuses are adhering to. And so I want to thank you all. And at this point, ask my colleague and friend, Ellen Emoto, our Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of Faculty, to please provide his academic affairs updates.
Great. Thank you, Sandy. And Happy New Year to everyone here. Thank you for being here. And I really appreciate your commitment to the Pitzer community and to what it is we're trying to do to keep our students safe and to be able to make academic progress. I think that it's important now also for, if you have questions, answers, that to put them in the Q&A section of the screen that you have rather than the chat, that we're going to try to come back to those Q&A either in real time or at the end. I just want to provide a quick update about the academic side of things as we enter the spring semester, and I'd be glad to answer questions after that as well. But we will begin classes as scheduled on January 18th. And as Sandy said, that students will be allowed to come to campus after that point and to move into campus. But it's important for students to attend their classes starting next week. They will be attending them online. As you have already heard in today and in our communications, that the first 2 weeks of the semester will be online instruction, and the faculty I have been communicating with are preparing for that. But this is not the 2021 academic year where we flipped to online instruction and stayed there. Our intention is to return to residential in-person educational experience after those first 2 weeks. So I really want people to think about this as it is a return to what much like it was in the fall in terms of an in-person educational experience, just happens to be the first 2 weeks starting out online. Our faculty and staff are vaccinated and boosted, or in the process of uploading that information. So just as we've requested as students, we'll be requesting that on the faculty and staff side. In anticipation for returning to in-person, I will say that when students come back to campus and then after those 2 weeks, some of the classes may be outdoors just as they were in the fall. That is one of the ways that we are helping to reduce spread, is by having classes taught outside. Faculty will make that choice and be communicating that to students. In starting online, the students will be able to access their Zoom links for classes through most likely the Sakai sites for each of their classes, or faculty will be emailing those out to students enrolled in classes. We're working on a process now for PERMs, where students who are trying to get into classes, encouraging faculty to provide links for those first few weeks of classes to those students to be able to make those come to class and then see if they can get into that later on. But with respect to registration, let me also add that over break that we have added close to 20 new classes into our class plan for this semester. So I know that some students had some difficulties with registration toward the end of last semester. And I will say students can enter the portal now and make adjustments to their schedule, and we will have the normal drop and add period for the first couple of weeks of class. So there are new class options that are available for students, and I encourage you to look at those, and especially if you ended up with a semester plan or schedule that you needed to still fill in a couple classes or wanted to make changes in that schedule. The faculty, I have recently sent a communication to faculty. We've had a town hall with our faculty and staff. One of the issues that we have stressed with faculty is also, much like the fall, the need to think about and prepare for possible accommodations for students. And with the realization that students with Omicron may be out, many more students may be out for periods of time. So as faculty prepare not only to be online in the start of the semester, but also for the rest of the semester, that they are thinking through the accommodations they made in the fall, but also what other modifications or accommodations may be necessary in terms of accounting for sickness or absences to allow students to make good progress academically and be successful in this fall semester. I will stress, and this is something that Sandy also said, that this is a 5C plan. This is not just a Pitzer plan, that everything we're talking about right now is what will be happening across the colleges. So all of us are starting online and in those first 2 weeks. And part of that process is that not only does Sandy meet with her counterparts on a regular basis, but I also meet with the academic deans across the colleges on a regular basis. And we are in contact with each other about what is happening on each of our campuses and these communications, but also in making sure that we stay aligned on our plan moving forward. So what you're hearing about today is a plan that will be enacted across, for the most part, across all of the campuses. The one thing I will add to this is that we are also now trying to start to explore some possible flexibility around our drop and add dates, knowing that the first 2 weeks be online, and then we're going in person, that students may need some flexibility, not only in arriving here, but also in making decisions for the rest of the semester. So there'll be more information, hopefully, about that forthcoming. So that is the broad sketch about our academic plan for this semester. I, like everyone here, am hopeful that we will be able to return as soon as possible to our in-person instruction. I know that the Pitzer community is strong and resilient, and I thank you for your commitment to college again, and for your continuing investment in your students and in Pitzer College. So at this point then, I will turn things over to, obviously Nurse Zephyr is here to make provide some information around medical issues.
Actually, thank you, Alan. Even before that, I'll briefly shoot it back over to Brandon just to share any sort of updates. I know Shari also is going to chime in as well. Zephyr's been sort of in and out. It's been a pretty intense day for her. I've met with her earlier, so I can say firsthand she's been fielding quite a bit. So I'll pass it back over to Brandon, but just want to thank you and Sandy for those really important updates and plans. And then we'll work Zephyr in as well too. So Brandon.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to sort of echo what has been shared here already, and also kind of piggybacking off of what Alan has already shared about the Q&A portal. There are many questions that are coming in, very good questions. If we aren't able to address them live on the webinar itself today, what we're going to be doing is archiving these and answering them in real time, and then sharing that out with the rest of the community. So rest assured that those questions will be addressed as we can. But before we go into our moderated Q&A portion of this with Vince, I also want to sort of reintroduce again Shari Simon, who is a parent of 2 Pitzer students and also our co-president of the Family Leadership Council. And we wanted her to join us, one, to obviously showcase sort of the important role that families play in the student experience, but also being a part of the Pitzer community, as well as just being an advocate and a voice for you. We have heard some of your concerns. We want to make sure that those concerns are, of course, addressed, but we want to also just open up the floor to Shari to say a few words, and then we will head over into the Q&A. Thank you, Shari.
I was going to say, Brandon, thank you for that introduction, but I noticed that we have both Nurse Zephyr and I believe Dr. Jandel with us now, and I thought perhaps given the demands on their time that we should flip back to the two of them, and then I could pick up from there.
Sounds great. Thank you, Shari.
So Dr. Jandel, we'll start with you. We'd like to just sort of, have you give some updates around much of the planning that's been going on with regards to the safe return. There are many questions, as you can imagine, that you've been fielding, we know for a fact. And just being able to give a little bit of a framing of the plan as it relates to student health services. And, Nurse Zephyr, if you do have a moment and also want to chime in, we welcome that as well. But thank you, Dr. Jandel, for making the time.
Thank you, Vince. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. And I'm not sure all the topics that have already been discussed, so maybe I'll just kind of give a brief overview of what I have been advising the colleges and what we've been seeing. I've been in touch here locally with other campuses who have already started to repopulate, such as USC, UCLA, and kind of gaining from their experiences. And what we're seeing is that we will expect COVID to be on campus. It's going to come on campus when we repopulate. There probably will be some transmission on campus, but most cases, almost all cases, are mild or asymptomatic. Students are recovering fairly well and are able to, start with their online education and kind of make it through their initial isolation phase. And really, I think we're going to be able to move past this surge that we have here successfully and get to our primary objective, which is to educate the students and get back into what we want to do. So that being said and done, we've prepped the campuses to expect the volume of positives, to make sure that we have the correct amount of isolation space and procedures to safely isolate and accommodate for dining and academics, and provide for the students when they return. Things will look a little bit different. There will be some new restrictions in place, which I'm sure the team has already spoken to. Student health operations will be slightly different, a lot less direct interaction. We want to keep our staff safe and available so that way we can continue to serve the health of our students. We're actively working to update our procedures in terms of an isolation release consistent with the guidelines after day 5. So on day 6, we can do some antigen testing. So we're working furiously to secure that supply and to put up the infrastructure to handle all that, so that students don't have to stay in isolation. If they can test negative, with the antigen test, they don't have to stay in isolation. And that certainly will be helpful for easing the load on students on the campus and also for mental health purposes. It is tough to be in isolation. We recognize that. We're not trying to be punitive when we put your kids in isolation, but we also want to make sure we're keeping the rest of our community safe and we're following good, sensible medical guidelines. So a lot of work is going on. Maybe I'll, just kind of stop there, see if Nurse Zephyr has any other insights, and maybe move more towards Q&A rather than kind of a prescribed talk here. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. I just wanted to say to everybody, to the community and to students that as healthcare workers, we are aware of COVID. We know it's going to be on campus and we have systems in place to deal with it. I, for one, am directly in charge of employee cases. I test employees, and I'm also here for resources for students. Students are welcome to email me, and I will get back to them about isolation deadlines, any symptoms, any problems that they may have. But I also wanted students and parents to know that the employees are being taken care of as well. We are requiring weekly testing for all of the month of January for any employee that's going to be on campus, as well as if anybody's symptomatic, we are isolating them. And so if COVID's coming, well, it is going to be on campus, but hopefully with employee testing and student testing, we can go ahead and try to get over this spike quickly.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Jindal, and thank you, Nurse Zephyr, for chiming in. So we, again, want to give Shari an opportunity to also share her perspective as well. And then at that time, we'll certainly turn it over for a moderated Q&A. We recognize there are quite a bit of questions that are jumping into the chat and want to try our best to answer as many of those as we can.
Okay, good. I think I'm off mute. So first of all, I want to say welcome to everyone as well and Happy New Year. And also say how grateful I am to be included in this dialogue and have the opportunity as one of the co-presidents of the Family Leadership Council to be here and represent families. We realize how difficult these few weeks have been and what an incredible challenge COVID continues to present you with. And we also realize that there's a broad range of opinions in terms of how to proceed, both in the immediate term and for the rest of the semester, and that you are also responsible for not only to the students, but that there are other constituents. There are all the staff, there's all the faculty, and that you really are doing your absolute best, as you said, to really focus on the overall impact of the community. That said, and as I believe you can see by the chat and by the Q&A questions that are coming in, is that we have in fact been hearing from a number of parents who are raising some concerns. And so if I may, and also looking at the questions that are coming in from the chat, if I can begin by perhaps raising some of the higher level questions and to sort of and direct those to perhaps anyone on the panel who feels that they can best jump in. The first question that many parents are articulating is that given the risk to students getting very, very sick is so very low, I guess the question is, what is the motivation behind sort of moving towards more stringent, a more stringent regimen and sort of headed down this path of the 2 weeks of online learning, and what conditions need to be met for you to flip the switch and say, yes, we're going to go back to live instruction? Because I think there's growing angst among students and families that it'll be 2 weeks at a time and 2 weeks at a time, and that half the semester could potentially be spent in an online learning environment. So that's hopefully did that question come across?
Absolutely. I think Dr. Jindal, I think we can partner on this response, and maybe what you were gleaning from the field in terms of the surge and the peak and the need to implement mitigation efforts, and then I can partner from there.
Sure, yeah. So, most medical experts are thinking that we're going to have the peak of this surge right around mid-January to end of January. And then there probably will be a very rapid decline as, Omicron has done what it's done. This is based on our observations from other countries such as South Africa, UK, as well as just kind of the nature of previous viruses and previous pandemics. So that's really the best estimate that we have here. I think maybe, and Sandy can probably talk more to that, Dean Vasquez, but, we're not just, we're a community here, right? We're a tight-knit community here. It's not just the students. We have students who are immunocompromised. We have students who do have serious underlying health issues. And we certainly have faculty and other staff members who we need to keep healthy in order to keep all the student operations supported, right? The dining and the cleaning and the facilities and the professors, we need to keep them all healthy. So we do need to be mindful in our policies of not just how it impacts students, but how it impacts our community as a whole. And I'm sure all of that has gone into the calculus of Pitzer's decisions in crafting their response. So, Sandy?
Yeah, and I completely agree. It goes back to that core value of social responsibility and the greater good, keeping in mind that we need to sustain our faculty, our staff, our students. And also I go back to that resilient growth mindset. We are going through a phase of this pandemic that we hope we will be very soon, on a better path, and trying to be proactive and mindful with this surge that we're experiencing and the projections, and learning from other campuses, in some of their experiences that they're having. And rather than bringing, students and integrating the entire community and the Claremont College's community in a normal return from a 5C perspective, we want to implement these mitigation efforts so that we can help manage also the understanding that at some point, all of us are going to be impacted directly by COVID. It's accepting that, but also evolving through that together. And hopefully these efforts will not only help provide mitigation, but the staggering support so that we can allow also student health services, the bandwidth with all of the labor shortages that are going on in the field. We're seeing that in fields of student affairs, for example, as well. We want to be with students and as normal of an experience as possible, but we have to plan responsibly for these 2 weeks. We are just grateful for the partnership.
And I think one other thing is, that the issue of equity, which I know Pitzer is very committed to. We know there are going to be students who cannot travel because their pre-travel test is positive and they have to isolate. We have students who are going to travel, and get turned positive upon arrival because of the results. So we want to make sure everybody has equitable access to education in those first 2 weeks. Nobody has to miss out because you're not able to come back for in-person. So I think there are many factors here that really support the approach. And we're not unique. I think many higher education campuses across the country are following that approach because it really does provide for the best transition back to in-person learning for our students.
Absolutely. And I think I share with folks, I really believe Pitzer is the conscience of the Claremont colleges. And we always lead with equity in mind in our practices. And that is also where the rubber meets the road in our support to our students. And we understand that there are students who may not have access to the booster where they are, whether in the nationally or internationally. They may not have access or the resources, given all of the impaction with testing right now. We are preparing to be able to phase in with that completed form that's returned to us for those students that need equitable access, that we're preparing and implementing the opportunity to get them that access upon their return.
Great, that was a very helpful answer, so thank you for that. Another question that has continued to come up from families has rested with sort of the nitty-gritty or the detail of what happens when your student who is completely asymptomatic tests positive. What happens to them? Where do they go? And if they are symptomatic, is there a different path for them? What will be done during this short-term time when we're online, and then what services will be provided for the students that test positive once we have returned to in-class learning?
Sure, and I think this will be a similar question. We're partnering with Dr. Jindal. Our on-call team is working 24/7, 365 days a week. We partner closely with our contact tracers who inform us of students who do test positive, and they provide them, and I'll let Dr. Jindal talk about the medical guidance that you can anticipate your students receiving, and then I'll follow up with the supports from Student Affairs.
Thank you.
Yeah, and from our end, you can hear, yeah, okay. From our end, upon a positive diagnosis, our procedures are going to change a little bit right now because the case volumes are just going to be that much higher that we can't, previously the volumes were low where we could make individual phone calls and connect with the students directly. It's going to be a bit more automated where they're going to have intake forms that they can fill out or they will be required to fill out and get back to us. And any kind of medical support they need, we can do either through phone visits at Student Health or through our telehealth 24/7 telehealth partner, 7C Health, so they can have access to medical care. Our contact tracers will provide an initial estimated release date based upon the original kind of 10-day plus 1 day, so the 11th day of release. And they'll also let them know that if they are improving with their symptoms, if they don't have fevers, and or if they're asymptomatic, when they can be eligible to get that antigen testing appointment to come get their antigen test done to see if they're negative to be able to be released earlier. So we have those systems in place, and like I said, the antigen testing program we're putting up, we'll have more details on it by the end of the week, which the campus will share out. And yeah, we stay in touch with campus liaisons. For each campus we have liaisons. At Pitzer we have liaisons, so we stay in close touch with them. And then Sandy and her team and Vince's team, they take over and kind of do their internal procedures, which you can outline there.
And, just so you know, in addition to Student Health Services, we do have Nurse Zephyr here and a medical assistant that are dedicated to Pitzer, and they're part of what we call our Pitzer COVID care team. We have been meeting twice a week, every week over the last semester, and we've continued to do so during this time. And procedurally, students will be provided support with an isolation space coordinated through our team and our on-call dean, leading with Residence Life. Our dean on call will make a personalized outreach to the impacted student. Students also have access to a 24/7 online form that they can complete. We ask them as part of that process when we're notified that they test positive to please complete the form so that we can help support them with any specific needs that they might have during that time. We also provide them information about mental health resources and support through our Strive to Thrive program. And again, now that we're anticipating the start of our enhanced counseling support dedicated to Pitzer, they will have access to those resources as well. We also know that Monsoor Counseling is going to re-implement the isolation and quarantine support group for students that will be accessible through Monsoor Counseling, but meals are delivered to their door. Again, that online form will articulate for them all of the necessary needs that they may have, but their room will be prepared for them with bedding and supplies that they may need. And if there's additional supplies that are needed, our team will help to support the student with those needs.
I would also add to that as well, Sandy, that in the moment when a student is notified that they've tested positive, really to try to prioritize the safety of the community, we need those students as soon as possible to get back to their rooms and try to isolate as soon as possible. And we'll start to work with those students on a one-on-one level of what are those next steps. In some cases, they'll need to be relocated to designated isolated spaces and all those things. But one of the things we can't have is maybe a student saying, well, I just have mild symptoms or I'm asymptomatic, so I'll just go to class and finish out this class and then I'll eventually get back to our OSA staff. It's so critical that we try to contain this, particularly with the transmission rates being so high and can happen so quickly. So that's just one of those things where we really want to partner with our student body to make sure when you get those timely notifications that you really adhere and take that serious. The other thing too, we're fielding quite a bit of questions with regards to prorating room and board, given that those first 2 weeks classes will be online. And while it's not probably the best answer that folks want to hear, as it stands right now, we're not planning to prorate that for the fact that students can actually return to campus at the start as planned. While we certainly want to try our best to stagger that return to make sure that we're prioritizing safety, we're not preventing students from returning, on the 16th or the 17th. Now, if you do choose to stay out a little bit longer, totally fine. You have until the 28th, as Sandy mentioned earlier, by noon on that day. But because of that, we're still going to have all of the necessary services. We're just scaling back some of our social activities again to prioritize safety. So that's been a frequent question that's come up, and we wanted to make sure that we put that out there and give a clear answer around it. I don't know if anyone else want to chime in on that, but I figured I would just weigh in on it.
I did want to thank you, Vince. I did just want to, add to Shari's question that also to reassure students that student affairs will make notice to faculty, their faculty, and collaborate with them as it relates to the need for accommodations. And each faculty member will have the discretion around, how they feel they can best support students who are impacted by COVID. So I just wanted to take that off of anyone's concern.
Okay, thank you. And Sandy, to that point, and I think this also perhaps involves Dean Emoto, is that post, let's say we've returned to class instruction, and what we had seen based on last semester and what we have heard from some families was that students were put in, it was very few, but if you did go into the 10-day quarantine, so that, you could miss roughly 2 weeks of classes. And if it's up to each individual professor, if it's at their discretion to create a specific accommodation, that can be very burdensome to a student. That puts a lot of responsibility on them when they haven't been able to get to classes. Each professor will be doing that in a somewhat well-intentioned but non-standard way, and that can be difficult. So is there any way to streamline and simplify that process in anticipation that while there is the expectation that this will die down, that students don't have to carry the burden of first getting Omicron, being in isolation, and then having to navigate missing up to 2 weeks of classes on a case-by-case basis and with each different professor?
Let me start by answering some of that question, because courses, of course, vary tremendously. Science class versus a literature class versus a computer science class, and some of the classes are taught across the consortium, right? So that there is high variability to start with. So having a standard one-size-fits-all solution is not really going to be possible. But what I can say that we are doing and having encouraged faculty to think about the accommodations is, first of all, to think about those accommodations and make sure that they are included in class discussion early in the semester, and if possible in the syllabus, to think about what those accommodations will be, so that there is a pathway from the get-go for people about what might happen. We have worked with student affairs. Now I'm going to talk about some of those accommodations, right? So those could be faculty providing lectures, putting them up online on their Sakai site, or so that students can go and look at lectures. That happened a lot during our in our online year, but also last semester. And that was an accommodation not only for students who couldn't attend, but also for students who want to revisit a lecture after having been there live. So it enhances the educational experience for students, and is something that I think now with technology, faculty are making more use of. We have the capability to simultaneously, through a HiFlex system or also using Zoom, to have real-time students who are in class and located elsewhere. And some faculty, depending on the course, then may choose to do that as well. And they can record that as in real time and then put that up on their Sakai site. That is something that some faculty chose to do during the semester. We have worked with student affairs to include and budget for more tutors and more note takers for classes. So in some cases, it is another student who's in the class, takes notes and makes those available for the rest of the class. So that is another thing that we have been doing in the last semester and foresee doing again this semester, again, is creating that pathway for accommodation going forward. And that another thing that faculty had done in this last semester, which I envision they will do again, is more increased numbers of office hours for students in small group meetings outside of class. So that I think that our faculty worked very hard to provide reasonable accommodations for students, and that it sometimes involve just needing to meet with people on the side or outside of a class to be able to keep them moving forward with their academic progress. So that is the sort of there are other accommodations that are being operationalized, but those are some of the more common ones. And I think that for each faculty member to think about what makes sense for their class and to communicate that with students as early as possible is what we have been encouraging now faculty to do going into this semester.
Right. And I can share with you, we have faculty that come here through student affairs all of the time as partners, and consistently, our partnership with them and sending them the notices to Pitzer faculty when students are positive, it empowers them with the ability to pivot their pedagogy so that they can move their classrooms outdoors. Our facilities team has done a wonderful job with helping to prepare the outdoor space classrooms because we know the in-person teaching and living experience is quintessential to the liberal arts education experience. And it's a beloved part of the close-knit community that we have here. And we're just grateful for the strong partnership we have with academic affairs.
Thank you. Brandon, I think it's time to move into a more general Q&A. This was very helpful, and I appreciate you going into this level of detail and sharing how much forethought is going into this. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Shari. So I also want to be mindful of time. I also just want to reiterate that these questions are being archived. We will answer them and send them back out and share them with the parent community. But I want to pass it back over to Vince, maybe answer maybe one or two more questions, and then we will go into closing.
Sure thing. Thanks, Brandon, and thank you, Shari. So we're getting so many different types of questions, and so we're truly bouncing around. But I know I've seen quite a bit of questions in regards to access to the library, and will students be able to access that still during this time? And the answer is yes. As it stands right now, students will still be able to access the library without restriction. And so, the same sort of masking expectations, those things will obviously stay in place. But we recognize with us making, a lot of bit of scaled back decisions with regards to social interactions, we don't want that to be sacrificed. And so, we would just, continue to encourage folks not to, cluster in large groups in those spaces as well, considering it's indoors. And so just want to continue to put that out there, especially since we've had a lot of conversations that relates to academics. One of the things I'm going to also reemphasize is, with the social experience is that as Sandy mentioned, we have a COVID care team that we're meeting twice a week, and we're talking through all of those things. And so we want to be agile. and nimble as much as possible, we're committed to an in-person experience. And so there will be some concessions on some things, and we're going to always prioritize safety, but we really do want to try our best to have this be a meaningful in-person experience for students still. And we don't foresee what we're seeing right now in these first 2 weeks. A big part of this is to be precautionary. And so, you know, we rather take a conservative approach on the front end to allow for a more meaningful experience for the rest of the spring semester. And so, you know, there are a lot of questions coming in regards to mental health, and we want to continue to affirm that. Again, our Strive to Thrive program, we're working with students on an individual basis as well. We know that some students have higher needs. We're certainly partnering with Monsoor. And so this is going to be one of those things that we have to unite as a Pitzer community around this. This won't be our destination forever. And so we'll have to be a little bit more nimble in these key moments. Given that where we are at time, I do just want to reemphasize Brandon's point that there's so many questions that's come in, and we are going to answer those. Feel free to also reach out to our team in OSA on an individual level as well too. So if you feel that there's been a time-sensitive question that wasn't answered, we certainly welcome and encourage you all to reach out to us. And we'll get back to you all as soon as possible with that. But I'll turn it back over to Brandon for any sort of closing thoughts. Really want to, again, thank you all for the time. We really want to prioritize our safety, and we want this to continue to be a meaningful experience for our students.
Thank you so much, Vince. And again, thank you to our entire panel and all of you for joining us this morning. As I said before, we're going to be communicating a lot of what you heard today by way of email, but also on our social media groups. We know our Facebook parent group is very active. So we will be sending that out, and many of the questions or responses to the questions in real time. So you'll be hearing from us shortly on some of the programs that we also have in the spring. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And again, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thank you.